We are live. Welcome everyone to the live panel on the first day of the Content Marketing Virtual Summit. My name is Jay Sen. I'm one of the co-hosts at the Content Marketing Virtual Summit. Really excited about today's panel discussion. So welcome to all our panelists. Hi everybody. Hi John. Hi Boyd. Hi Joana. Hi Bernard. So very briefly, we've gotten some amazing questions. And before we dive into the panel, I'll just quickly introduce each of our speakers and panelists today. So starting with Joana Inch. Joana is, one of the things I love about Joana is that she has produced an amazing book called Go to Market, which I can actually say that I enjoyed reading it very much. And Joana's agency, Hat Media, she's the founder of Hat Media, and she's really focusing on helping technology companies scale and grow using both social selling and ABM and other mechanisms that are really directed at technologies and startups to help them to understand how to scale what's working once they have product market fit. So welcome, Joana. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
The next panelist I'll introduce very briefly is someone who's fast becoming a good friend. His name is Boyd Wason, and Boyd is the CEO of an agency called Engaging Partners. They have been one of the very first HubSpot partners. They've been really through the whole growth range of HubSpot, and they're a diamond agency partner of HubSpot. And Engaging Partners is working to drive both marketing and sales. And Boyd is one of the deepest experts, I think, worldwide. Kind of a very humble person, but based on what I've seen and everything I know about him, in the area of personal development. And he's helped clients create over 300 personas, and if you include today, I think over 1,000 persona developed. So he's really boiled down all the best practices, what to do, what doesn't work, how to make it really practical and useful. So welcome. It's great to have you here, Boyd. I think you're on mute. All right, I'm going to go to the next person. So John Hill is welcome, John. It's good to have you here as a panelist. So John and Bernard are both co-founders, so I'll introduce them together. So John Hill and Bernard Kassab are the co-founders. Welcome, Bernard. Of agency called Ucidity. It's a play on the word lucidity to make things clear and easier to understand. And Ucidity with a U is a digital agency in Australia, and they help businesses grow exceptional branding and really integrate marketing and sales. So they work on improving the process around sales, the process around marketing, and an integration of the two. And John has 25 years plus experience on the technology marketing side, and Bernard is an expert in both experience design and also in branding. So welcome to both you, John and Bernard. And John and Bernard and I hang out almost every other week. They hosted me at one of their Australia events. Boyd and I recently did a talk together about using AI for persona development. So and Joanne has just been incredibly helpful in every interaction. So I think this is a great panel, and I'm really excited about the kinds of questions we've received. So I'm going to dive now into the questions. And the first question is going to be a pretty in-depth one. And I think this one will be just so everyone can listen, but I'll sort of preview who I think would be a good one to answer this. So I think, Boyd, you could possibly take this one. So this is from Noah, and the question is as follows. So Noah says, my company provides basically escape room experiences, fun and safe escape room experiences. So they run an escape room. And in the past, we've mainly served individuals and groups of friends and families. But recently, we have a lot of companies that are partnering with them to provide escape room events for staff. And so Noah says, I'm bringing in a salesperson to expand my escape room to corporations. I'm running into some challenges when creating buyer personas for these corporations. And his question is, Noah's asking, should I build personas, or should we build personas to reflect the structure of the company, i.e. SMEs versus large companies, et cetera? or should we build personas for specific people within a company that they might be talking to? For example, somebody who's just doing research before they recommend escape room experiences as a corporate team building. So that's his question, Boyd. And if you have,
cool.
and I'll just hand it over to you and see what you think. And just if everyone could limit the replies to around 3 to 4 minutes, that'd be great. And then that way we'll have a chance to keep going around.
Cool. Okay, interesting question. Obviously, quite a lot of dimension in there. I think that when a companies are moving from, targeting B2C to targeting B2B, there's a step change in strategy there, and it is very much a completely different strategy. Sorry, I've just got a call happening. Just going to switch that off. Sorry about that. There's definitely a change happening, and they're moving from creating consumer demand, creating demand strategy to probably more of a account-based marketing type strategy. So, and when they do that, they're going to start to look at having different personas in their mix. So I think the first step I would take would be to say that to recognize that you're moving from a direct to consumer or trying to generate primary demand to one where you're going to need to start to outreach more to your market, and you're probably going to need to rethink your strategy around targeting accounts. So I think the first thing to do would be to build a profile of what your ideal customers look like. So, they're corporations with staff levels of 100 plus. They work in certain territories. Maybe they're not. Build some profile, and then from there, you can then start to say, well, what are the persona? Who are the people within those companies who are most likely to reach out to us? So, what are the personas within those? And you'll find that they may be the social coordinator in a business, or it may be the EA, and those people are coming with different thoughts and ideas. So I build up that, and then I think one of the things that's really interesting about this, so coming back to my experience in building personas, is the fact that people will, when you go into a new area, you're switching from consumers to businesses, from B2B to B2C, or the other way around, is that you think this audience because you know that audience really well. You naturally think, well, we know this audience. And I think the biggest thing is to be prepared for change. So you may go in and say the customers we're targeting are these, and the types of people we're targeting within those ideal customers are these types of personas. But in actual fact, when you start to get in there, be prepared for change, because you may find that, well, you think it could be social coordinators, that it actually ends up being executive secretaries, for example, who are managing these events.
Great.
Does that make sense?
So that was really helpful. So I think, Boyd, just to kind of recap for Noah, a couple of the points that you're sharing. The first one is that do some primary research and really talk to the potential corporate buyers. And I think you had mentioned in your talk as well, I'll reference that you could go back to your customer list and see if you have any types of customers that may be registered for their escape room with a corporate email, and say, hey, yes, what did you like about it? Or even ask people in your survey. I think this is something you also mentioned during your talk, that which Boyd gave, and is giving an amazing talk at the event about persona development. But you mentioned that you could also ask people when they sign up for the event, right? What are you part of a corporate, right? So they could actually get some input and see if they're coming in for team building. Like, what's your reason for signing up? Because they may already have some customers like that.
Yes, correct. Yeah. And LinkedIn profiles are a really good way. If you use those people and then look them up on LinkedIn, you suddenly get a perspective on, where their careers come from, why, how long they've been in their current job, what their position is in that business, etc. And you'll start to build up a real flavor for that.
So before I go to the next question, I think the other thing that it sounds like Noah has some concerns that he doesn't know if he should be focusing on the people he's going to be communicating with or the ultimate buyer? And what's your feedback to him about that question?
I think when you talk B2B, that the ultimate buyer is the person with the cash. Like the people who are coming along as part of the team building exercise, sometimes they don't even know until they arrive what they're in for. So trying to create primary, they're already creating primary demand. So what the effect should be is that this is a really good place to do team building, for example. And the people who organize team building are these people, and I promote to them. And then when people turn up at my event, they go, "Oh, we're doing this," because they've already been affected by the primary demand activity that they've got. So those two things should come back together. But if they don't, it doesn't matter, because you're in a B2B sense, you're focusing on the person who's going to write the check.
Okay, great. So you're saying start with, for Noah, you're saying start with really thinking about who's going to actually make a decision, because that's going to be the most efficient use of their time,
yeah.
right?
And when we get into more complex B2B environments, there'll be more, in this case, there may be one, maximum two people in the buying the process. Maybe there's a sign-off manager, so it could be important to know who they are. But, in more complex environments, there can be, 6 or 7 people who are going to touch a sale. So this is a it's a good one to start on. It's fairly simplistic. So it's going to be fairly easy to work up who that persona is. And maybe there's also a sign-off person that you need to build a persona for. So even though you don't see them, you would want to support your primary persona with the information they need to sell to their boss. So it's quite common that, in these programs, you'll have how to sell to your boss you may not write that to them, you may not give them that material, but you construct it as how you sell to your boss. And you say, I realize you've got to present this to someone, so here's the presentation deck to do that. We'll just put your name on the top. You provide that to them, and they take it to their boss. They look like they're a hero because they look like they've done all this work and thinking. In actual fact, you've actually recognized that there's 2 people in the buying process, 2 personas, and you've addressed content for both of those personas.
Yeah, so I think, Noah, if as you think about doing this, one of the things Boyd's suggesting is really make it easy for whoever is interested in using your escape room to actually present it to their team and their manager by pre-creating a presentation they can put their name on. So the next question, thank you so much, Boyd. Very, very, I think very helpful. A lot of companies can use that. If you're not the person who asked the question, I think write some notes, and let us know what part of that would be applicable if you've had this similar question. Should you target the decision maker or someone else in the company, and should you be focusing on just the company as a persona or the person? I think we'll come back and recap that later. So the second question here is going to be for Joana. So this one is about account-based marketing, and this is anonymously asked. So the question is, my organization is one of the high-end private schools for girls. And in the past, we have relied heavily on communities and physical events for our marketing. In the past 3 years, we've needed to shift it online as more and more parents are researching online on deciding a school for their girls. So as a marketing director and someone who's in charge of student enrollment, I need to figure out which marketing channel to focus on. I've been looking into social media, blogging, social selling, and account-based marketing. How should I distribute my marketing efforts to be effective in social selling?
Yeah, great question. Very challenging one, because they're not essentially in the B2B space, yet they're willing to give ABM a try. I think the important thing is being able to create a list of target accounts that are definitely going to be suitable to this. And being a private school, location comes into...
I just have a quick thing. I don't think I defined ABM, so maybe you could start just by defining what it is in case someone's not familiar with that acronym.
Absolutely. So account-based marketing, ABM, it's really just a strategy that focuses on specific target accounts. Usually we say those target accounts need to be, from mid to enterprise level. The reason we want to focus on accounts rather than leads is because there's usually, 5 to 6 stakeholders that need to make that decision. So we need to raise engagement, and also raise the number of people that we influence within those organizations specifically. So I think in this case, it's probably just mom and dad that need to be influenced. It's not anybody else. So I think account-based marketing still could be done, but not, the way it normally is. I think in this instance, what they're doing already with the communities and events, I think is a great idea. That's definitely a channel they should keep pursuing. I think when it comes to schools, I've got kids in schools, and I know that, every time I run into the parents at the playgrounds, we're always talking about, oh, what high school are you sending your kids to? Why, so we're essentially relying a lot on what other mothers and fathers are saying. So I think, if they can grab their current parents, a community of parents, and I think do something for them that would just get the word out, that's probably a really good marketing strategy for them. I believe social media is a must. It's just because of that brand element. So, it raises trust, authority. So they definitely need to be present on that. They probably need to do a lot of local events as well. I'm not sure whereabouts they're located. And I'm not sure how many of the parents are willing to travel to the school as well. I think that's a huge influence, the location. With ABM, I think as long as they can get information on their target accounts, it could be done, because they can be influenced, via email marketing. They can be influenced through, socials, but it's really just about figuring out who they are. And I think that group of people is not really someone you're going to find on LinkedIn based on job titles. I think, there's a few elements there, like what is their location? How old are their children? Are they parents? Those types of questions. So I don't think ABM is the best strategy for them. I think what they've been doing works well, and, definitely tapping into existing communities and events. I think partnerships is another big one that they should look at. Partnerships with, other local companies in the area that do things with parents. So tapping into that database as well. I think that would be perfect for them.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think it's really good. I think sometimes people, number one, they don't necessarily know what is ABM, account-based marketing. And essentially, as you explained, Joanna, and, again, back to your talk that you did that you're doing at the summit, which is a very deep talk about social selling and account-based marketing, a very practical one. And one of the things that you really helped to clarify is that for certain types of organizations, they can identify the buyers who really need their product very badly. They just don't know about it. And essentially, one of the things I think you said is that in your talk, just to recap, and you're going to go over this, is that, it's almost like, 100% of those people would want to buy from you if they really got to know you. And so, that's a great feeling, and having that list of people that really would naturally buy from you. So for this school, your point is that it's more about social proof. And so really partnership with other organizations that support, welfare of girls and how they develop, and then utilizing and also creating a community around that and having that social proof could be more appropriate than ABM, account-based marketing for this type of audience, for this target market. But social selling is really still, from your point of view, it's still really appropriate, right, for this type of organization, Joanna?
I believe so. I think they should definitely keep, expanding their brand awareness via socials. I also think, with ABM, some parts of ABM could benefit them. For example, the engagement metrics that are created via, email outreach, via social outreach. I think they can definitely, find out who these parents are and try and engage them on a deeper level. And that's what ABM is essentially about. It's when you're creating content, you're actually hyper-personalizing it to what these people's pain points and objectives are, as opposed to generic content. I think the biggest challenge for them with ABM would be just creating those target accounts, because they could be any type of job title. They could be, different locations. There's really essentially nothing that they have in common, if that makes sense. So I think the best way to discover who these are would be to reach out to other places that could be potential partnerships and tap into that database, and then from there get to know the parents better and find out what they need to know, and influence them in a way that would, make them consider that school.
That's really, I think that's a great answer to clarify. And I really like that the answers aren't necessarily what people expect. I think that's where the most learning can happen. So I think that's really helpful. And I think it's good to be really straight as well, that not every single method will be applicable to every single organization. So I hope that was helpful to you, the person who asked that. So the next question, I'm going to go to branding. And we're going to come back around to persona development and also social selling again. So the next question, I can point this one to Bernard. The question is essentially as following. This is an anonymous question from a small business owner that does a little bit of background noise. So my company does roofing and cladding. Our website is very basic, and our last website was updated 5 years ago. It's a WordPress website. I'm planning a new website, a website rebrand, and I'm also putting together a blogging and social media plan. Right now, we don't know what sort of budget we should have. We're thinking it should just be around 10K. I don't have a huge team doing marketing and social right now. Can you advise me on whether I should hire an agency or what approach I should possibly take towards considering my rebrand? And what's the, from your point of view, what's the ideal mix of investment for blogging versus social media that I should do? So there's a bunch of questions in there. So maybe you're used to getting this kind of like basket of questions. So I'll just hand it over to you, Bernard, and you can respond and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully this sounds okay. Does it sound okay?
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo from the walls, but I think I can manage.
Just have to work with it. I'll move the mic a little closer. A lot of great points in there, and it is something that a lot of people consider. The investment is a hard one to say. It really comes back to the value it's going to build for your business, right? So if you're going to engage somebody, I would recommend engaging an agency in this particular case because you're looking to cover a lot of different aspects. You're not going to find one single person who's going to be an excellent brander and graphic designer, who's going to be an excellent web developer on WordPress, and also an excellent content writer. It's just like, it's impossible to have somebody who does all of that really well. And for the investment as well, it'll be impossible to find a single individual. So you should be looking for an agency that at least has expertise, an expert in each one of those different segments. And that way you're going to get the most value. The second thing you then got to ask yourself is, what is the goal that you want to achieve? Are you looking just to create a brochureware site, just to have a better position online? Or are you creating this to generate opportunities and create opportunities? That will also help you identify what agency is going to be the best fit for you. So when you go to market and you put together the brief, you ask them to tell you, okay, what are the strategic elements of the website that are going to help convert customers or help with your growth strategy, and then outline what your strategy is. We're looking for significant growth this year, to double in size, etc., etc., etc. The other thing to consider is when choosing an agency is whether or not they have payment plans. So rather than sacrificing the quality of the project, see if there's a way that you can break down the payments into a way that's manageable with the agency. And a lot of agencies will have some kind of variant on a milestone-based payment schedule or an ongoing payment schedule month on month for a term. What you don't want to do is dip your toe in the water and get a half-baked execution because the budget is restrictive. You want to look at the strategy as a whole, look at the goals that you're trying to achieve, and find a budget that aligns to that allows you to enable that end result. And for most businesses, your cash flow is quite lumpy and it's month on month. So having a 10K up front is a significant bite into the cash flow. Whereas if it's $1,000 a month over 10 months, it's a lot more digestible. So that would be the kind of initially the suggestions I would make on the approach. The second thing is that within that process, you want to find an agency that will dig deeper into those things. So like talking about personas and targeting, You want an agency who upfront is going to tell you, yeah, the first step is we're going to plan this, we're going to map it out, we're going to understand what the structure is going to be like, and we're going to understand that based on who we want to target and who we want to talk to and why we're talking to them. And then that's the value we're going to build behind it. Whether or not content is important at this point comes down to how they're intending to grow their client base. If they want to leverage their online presence more, they want to create more SEO juice, they want to be more targeted with how they talk to and who they talk to, then yes, invest in content. If it's kind of if you're just flipping a coin on it and you're going to do it very ad hocly and it's not going to be consistent, then it's probably not the best place to invest your time. The worst thing is when you go to a website and the blog says last updated January of 2020, that is more detrimental to how the brand looks than it is to have that blog there. And for the way that Google looks at content, it's not going to be generating a lot of SEO juice anymore after that length of time. They're going to be looking for the most relevant recent piece of content that's come out. So if you're investing in it, it's great for your brand, it's great for creating positioning in the industry, and it's also great for a credibility piece. But you have to be targeted with how you place it on the market, and you have to be consistent. If you're going to start on it, then make sure you have a resource that can continue it. And that might mean your first 3 or 4 articles you have written by a professional and use that as a template to then write the rest of the content. But you have to have you have to be able to align the time to be able to continue to maintain it. And then also look at it for your website as well. Being keyword rich, understanding the user's journey and how that translates into the website that you're building will significantly change the way that it's received when it goes into market. And that's not just received by users and using the site, but actually the way that Google indexes and understands what's on the site. So the simple answer, I guess like an overview is make sure that you align on what you want to achieve with your agency, what the goals are, and where you can build in the value. Instead of having the budget be restrictive, find a way to manage the budget based on milestones or a monthly ongoing payment with that agency so that you can get the best final product that is niche towards the target that you want to go to. And then once you start to play with the content piece, make sure you're consistent. So find a way to consistently be able to apply that targeting to the content that you're producing. And I think that hits all the markers there. There was a lot in that question, so.
No, that was really helpful. I think one thing that you and John, have spoken to me about and have also talked about at the event in the past is, in your talk, is the importance to kind of have the company create a clear picture of where they want to be financially a year from now. So if they're at a, say, 1 million, run rate right now, turnover, and they want to be 2 million, then really break that down and ask, like, is that realistic? What are you going to do to get there? And what are the risks? And if there's no plan to get to 2 million or 3 million, and then what does it look like beyond the 2 million? What does it look like in 2 years from now or 4 years from now? And I think that this is the way I think you and John have really guided in your talks and in the way you've presented it at the event so far, which is like, if you don't know that, you're making a budgeting decisions in the dark. So I think the rest of your answer was really helpful, like breaking the payments up and, don't do something halfway and get an expert in to really, one of the other things, I'll just say this briefly and then we'll go to the next question, but you've also shared that you could have an expert, come in, help you kind of look at the options, and then you don't have to commit to the whole program with that particular expert. You could just get that strategy piece and then pay for that, and then you could essentially make a separate decision on execution. So these are things that are going to be referenced, and I think you cover in quite detail in your talk. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the next question. Thank you so much, Bernard, and we'll come back. So the next question is going to go to John, and this question is about. It's also about branding. So if you want to take it, great. If you want to do it jointly with Bernard, that's also okay. The question is from Stephanie, and the question is the following, and it's an interesting one. And she's asking, how frequently should I rebrand? And so Stephanie says, my company has just launched a new product, which is for consumers. It's a B2C. And in the past, we used to serve only B2B. Should I create a subdomain for launching my new product, which is directed to consumers, and keep my existing website for B2B customers? Or should I use a different approach, such as have a whole new website with a rebrand, like rebrand my website? And she has some other questions about rebranding, such as does it have a lot of effect on my SEO, on my search engine results? So her general question, John, is when would be a good, what would be her approach to address her website currently targets businesses, and she wants to have the ability for consumers to also understand that they have a product for them. And what advice do you have about how she could approach that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Look, I'd be really, I think what I'd be looking at is what's the makeup of the B2C versus B2B, once again in the long term for her business. If it's an approach where she is wanting to essentially dip her toe in the water to see if the market does take up that new B2C product, I would actually be looking at something like potentially a mini subdomain. So typically what we do with clients in these type of situations is we'll either have a mini subdomain or we have a very specific landing page. So subdomain would be what we call a microsite. So we might have a homepage about contact us. The other option is to have a single landing page with its own style of branding of the direction you want to be going down with that B2C service. And essentially it's a dip your toe in the water approach. So I have the digital resource to be able to present to market, have the channels to support the traffic to that mini site, and start taking measurements on how it's actually performing. Because I guess the challenge with this is that in order to do a full rebrand for a single new product, if it's say going to be 10% of your business versus 90%, which is your B2B, it's a heavy investment for potentially not a huge return. So I guess to partly summarize, would be wanting to look at what research has been done beforehand in order to know how the market is going to take up this new product. And if they're confident that there's going to be a fairly huge outreach, then you're more likely to invest money into branding. Otherwise, if you're wanting to just get out there and test the waters, I would more likely go with the approach with a single landing page and potentially a microsite to have just that little bit of differentiation in there. So just to I guess address what a landing page versus microsite is. So typically a landing page is a single page on your website. It typically doesn't have header or footer navigation that jumps out to the rest of your website. The sole focus is to have a visitor to that website take essentially two actions. One is click the back button because they're not interested, or two, go ahead with the call to action because it's something that they're heavily engaged with. So that's one single page that you can have your own design for. Whereas a microsite, typically it does require a little bit more technical, so you've got to obviously have the hosting, extra levels of management, and it's essentially its own website by itself, which does require a bit more overhead. So the simplest version is get the landing page out there, get some traffic to it, and see if it starts working. That's my SEO and all that. If it's starting to work, I would focus on SEO as you're getting results.
I think that's really helpful. I think one of the most important things that you indicated, John, is that for this person that they should set themselves up for learning. And I think that, you've spoken about this in the past, which is think of your business in terms of a series of experiments. so that, you know, if you can actually design the experiment, what you're planning to learn, how long it's going to take you, and what assumptions you have, and then the landing page fits into that perfectly, because you can just create an experiment. That way, you're not betting on a certain outcome. You're learning, you know, and then you can double your investment. So I think that's great. And thanks for explaining the difference between the landing page and the microsite. That was also really helpful. Okay, so we're going to go to the next question. The next question is going to be another persona development question, and I will target this to Boyd as well. And then we're going to come back to social selling in a moment and have the next question around social selling, so NABM. And so if somebody else wants to jump in on this one, Joanna, if you have a perspective on this, or someone else has a perspective, we can also open it up. But there's quite a few questions we haven't gotten to, so I think the format's working. I guess we'll stick to this. So, okay, here's the question. It's from Christine, and she's looking at. Christine says, I own a company that sells women's jewelry online, and she's selling mostly in 2 geographies right now, UK and North America. She relies heavily on Instagram and micro affiliates, so basically micro influencers. And my website enables people to just, you know, buy directly, and I have a decent email list. I have 2 questions. Should I create all the buyer personas I know, or should I focus on a few personas? And how do I choose which personas to focus on? And then she has some additional questions once that one is answered. So her main question is about how to decide how many personas and which ones to focus on.
Cool. Yeah, really good, interesting question. My thoughts are that personas can be used. In this case, we talk a lot about buyer personas, and they're used to help people understand how to target audiences with content, and then through attracting people through that content, how do you then take them into a buying process? Really interesting in her situation though, because she's probably got some product personas in there, and they're possibly one and the same thing. And the fact is that she's it sounds like Christine could be developing personas so that she can create ranges of jewelry around those personas. So I think could be potentially some similarities between her buyer personas for marketing and her buyer's personas for selecting jewelry and jewelry collections. And I think if you align those 2 things, I think that's probably the first point, as an alignment of those 2 things would be really helpful. Because there's no point in saying, well, my jewelry buying pattern is for this type of person, and my personas are going to be like for all these types of people. There's going to be a disconnect there. So I think it would be clever to start to think about those alignments. The second part of the question, this is one that I get quite often, is how many personas is the right number of personas? We've found that there is a magic number. And it'll vary for every company, but it's always going to be between minimum 2, maximum 6. Now, the reason I say that is because if you're developing content, if you have to develop content for a whole lot of personas, that is a huge amount of work. You can't handle that. So what you want to be able to do is to say, well, I may have 3 divisions of my business, and they may serve distinctly different markets. And when I look across them, I may have 12 personas. But the fact is, if you don't have a person in each division marketing, and you've got to do it all, then you couldn't have 12 personas or more. You're going to have to bring that down to something that you can manage. So while you may go out and understand all the personas you want to address, I don't believe it's worth developing them, fleshing them all out until they're complete. You're far better to bring it down to a smaller, manageable number. And in this case, Christina, sounds like it's a smaller business. So I'd be looking to be in the range of 2 or 3, probably about 3 personas for that would be about right. And those 3 personas are matched with buyer groups. Like there's obviously different, and I think those buyer groups probably align with life stage. So, at a certain stage of your life, you may be looking at a certain jewelry range. As you grow, you may change, or it could be psychographically aligned. It could be that, you're looking for people who like a certain style, like goth style or something. So you would align it around those. So I think, first of all, understand her business, understand her products, and where she's aligning her products into ideal customer groups, and then build those flesh out those personas and know more about them. Now, when she comes to do that, it may be that she's just been buying great jewelry and people have been buying it, and now she wants to work out how to market better. So it could be a case of diving into the data and going, well, let's look at who are my really good customers. Let's understand those people. Let's go and have a look at their LinkedIn profiles. Let's have a look at their Facebook profiles and understand their age groups and where they are, and build a persona around that. And then say, well, that's going to help me buy more of the jewelry that appeals to these people, as well as, hey, that's going to help me produce more content that appeals to these people. And of course, when it comes to personas and content, is that when you look into those content groups, that they're, is it everyday jewelry, or is it a jewelry for occasions, or is it jewelry for gifts? So those buyer personas may be targeting people who, when you look at your ideal personas, why do they buy more than others? Is it because they've got a large social life? And so how can you join into, do you start sending them images of the Met Gala and talking about Met Gala and the jewelry on the Met Gala because, you're an occasion person? Or is it more personal around some other, part of your life where, you may be collecting gold or something? Does that make sense,
Yeah.
Jay? Yeah.
I think there's a couple things that you shared, Boyd, that were really helpful. The first one that you have mentioned in your talk as well is around when you have a e-commerce brand and you're using micro influencers, you have a lot of insight and research that you could do about who's influencing your audience, and they kind of represent your persona in a way. So I think that's a very deep insight that you shared, in your talk. And another one that I think you shared today that was really helpful was that by doing this, they could actually break out and differentiate their brand so that they could develop more unique products that are appealing to that person instead of just being like kind of lost in the haze. I thought that was great. So I think that's a really thoughtful answer. Thanks so much. I think that was really great. Cool. So I think for the listener, right, like number one, go look at your influencers as Boyd has shared, and he has talked about this in the past, and really think about, do they represent your buyers? And which influencer are getting the most sales? Like if you can track that, you're going to get a lot of insight about they represent your buyer persona. That's who your buyers are aspiring to be. That's why they're influencers, right? That's why they're being influenced. Maybe you think they're an influencer, but they're not actually getting sales. So you know immediately that they're not really representing your persona. And I think the other breakthrough idea that Boyd shared is the development of new products based on, what your personas, kind of their unique features are. So that's great. So let me go to the next question really quickly. This is going to be for Joana. We're going to have time for a few more. So this one I think is going to be a very good one. So this is from an anonymous question asker, and it's the question is: I run a tech startup. I'm serving small and medium-sized enterprises who essentially, provide loans. They're in the lending market. And I guess they're not the owner. I proposed a 1-year promotion strategy. They're a CMO role. I proposed a 1-year social media strategy to my CEO, and that we should launch into 3 different areas like equipment, farmers and tradespeople. They had another vertical, also legal. And my biggest challenge is really explaining budgeting and decisions. Can you advise me, Joana, on whether I should hire a social media team or do it in-house? When should I consider working with an agency? And she has some additional questions like what channels I should prioritize. Generally, she wants to know how should I develop a social media budget and gain approval from my CEO if my target is $100K budget per year.
Yeah. Great question. Thank you. I'll answer the one about, going in-house or to an agency first. I think, especially when you're first starting out, you want to talk to the experts, because essentially what would really help with this approach to get results is if you start off with a strategy that has been proven to work in the past. So I would actually recommend engaging an agency or an expert, someone that's done this before, maybe for the first 3 to 6 months, and then learning from that as much as possible, and then taking it in-house and expanding on it.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's really a big. That's very concise and very helpful, because that's probably one of the biggest concerns people have, is they don't know when they should engage the agency. And I think your point, Joana, is that you're essentially getting a higher return on learning faster and earlier in the cycle. So if let's say I think this is something you've shared as well in your talk, Joana, and as we've discussed. But if you knew things a year earlier because you engaged an agency, that could then you're avoiding that whole year of waiting. And there's some things you might do differently. So one of the questions there is, if they do hire an agency, what should the scope of that engagement look like early on?
Yeah, I highly recommend they ask their agency, for mainly things around strategy, content strategy, posting strategy, what channels are right for us. Definitely don't use all of the social channels. Find out where your target audience is and connect with them. The other aspect of social is obviously the content strategy. So what do we want to be posting? How often do we want to be posting to really, engage our target audience? How also do we grow our audience on social? So it's not just about pushing content out. It's also about, is this content being engaged with, but also are we following the number of, are we growing the number of followers as well that we have, and are they the right people? So I think all questions to ask an agency, they should be able to answer that. They should be able to have, case studies as well, similar to yours, that they can show you. And then I think, definitely worth talking to an agency up front about these things, because one mistake I see a lot of organizations make is, yes, they know they need to do social media. They go out there, and a lot of the times they're just winging it. They're just posting, for the sake of posting. A lot of mistakes include also posting just about the company and what we do and how we serve you, rather than trying to solve pain points of their target audience. So there needs to be a mixture of, content pillars and topics, and an agency does know this. So I think they'll definitely benefit quite a bit from working upfront with the agency and try and learn from it as much as possible. And then slowly bringing someone in-house that could then take that over, because in the long term, it will be, a lot more affordable for them. But also, when it comes to social media, it really helps to have someone internal, that's on the ground, because there's usually things like events where they're taking photos. That's a process if you're going to send that to the agency and expect them to post it quite quickly. So it definitely helps having someone in-house eventually.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Again, like, have the agency help you up front. I think you're saying, like, prioritize your channels and consider, like, at least having somebody in-house to do the raw material gathering, like the photos. This was a fintech in the lending space. So is there anything that you could add for that type of industry, as far as pitching their CEO about having an actual, like, marketing budget set aside, and going to the CEO if they're the CMO role and doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. What an exciting space to be in as well, fintech. So I think when it comes to pitching the CEO is just interested in one thing, and that's the bottom line. Like, how will this help us? How will it serve us? And I think that's really where another matter where the agency could help. They can actually provide, a return on investment metrics from such campaigns. So I think it's really important when you go ahead and you've launched this campaign, to implement tracking that will then help you measure it to, down to the dollar, to see, has this had an impact. So I think with the CEO, they really need to be talking about, how is this good for brand awareness? How is this good for growth? How is this good for revenue? yes, we can track and measure everything at the end of the day. So I think that's what the CEO wants to know.
Yeah, that's super helpful. If you're, as Joanna has mentioned, if you're the person who asked the question, the CEO is looking to have something they can take back to the investors, and the agency that you're working with can probably help you even create a framework for that, so that even before the, sort of early on, they can tell you, hey, if you work with us, number one, you can break it into the first part of the engagement and then the longer term implementation. Maybe use a payment plan, as Bernard had suggested earlier, but they can help you to essentially have a framework to show you, to the CEO can take back to the investors and say, look, we're going to spend 100K, but this is the experiments we're going to run, and this is how we're going to be able to report it back, to you, what we've been able to do. And I think that's really, really helpful. And there's a lot of uncertainty with startups and when they're doing marketing. So do you have any, sort of final kind of advice? When you're a startup, everything's possible. Nothing is in place, right? So everything is kind of like a lot of work to do, and everything's possible. And you don't really have a lot of existing history to know where. So what would you suggest as far as like in terms of addressing that concern?
Absolutely. I think this is where social selling comes into play quite effectively for startups, because they are essentially competing with big brands that are already well known. So rather than trying to get their brand to compete with, the big brands, I think they should find people within the organization that I like to call key people of influence, the people that are going to be the influencers of this brand. And I think they need to connect with the target audience, and they need to build relationships. I think that's really the only way that they can steal people away from, the big companies if you're a startup, and get yourself well known and kind of better equipped with more clients sooner rather than later, especially if you're in the B2B space. So that's definitely one aspect of it. I think also exploring account-based marketing for startups, because if your traditional lead gen campaigns, they're not as effective as they used to be, and also they're quite expensive as well. You end up spending quite a bit on channels such as Facebook advertising, Google advertising, LinkedIn advertising. So if you do the research up front and you decide, in order for us to scale and grow affordably and effectively, we just need to focus all of our time, energy, and budget on these specific accounts. And if we try and connect with them, with the key people of influence in our organization, and we only create content that's personalized to them, therefore they resonate with it, they're more likely to become customers of ours, because we've taken the time to do that. And I think once they have those initial customers, it will then be easier for them to grow and scale with, different types of campaigns. But definitely for startups, I found that getting really hyper-focused on specific accounts from the get-go helps them grow quicker.
Yeah, I think you're sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, that's right. It also helps them figure out who the best kind of client for them is. I mean, I know a lot of startups, they'll kind of take on anyone and everyone, and then they very quickly realize these clients are really not effective for us. They're actually taking up a lot of time and resources, and they can be quite toxic to our growth. So finding out what type of clients work best for them early on through a campaign such as ABM can be, it saves them a lot of heartache in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Joanna. I think that one of the very helpful things that you just shared was that it's about having the early raving fans, the people who really see what your startup is doing, and they really want to be part of changing the world with you, if you will. And, for fintechs especially, that's a big deal. And if you have, I think you've mentioned this before, but if you have, for example, 30 to 50 really, really excited early adopters, they can generate so much value for your brand and for each other as well. They also get value by being those early adopters versus trying to reach every single type of buyer early on. And so I think that really helps this person to, based on what you shared, Joana, that they're not going to try to reach for, what they could be doing a year from now. Focus on the people who are going to really get it ahead of the time where other people are going to get it, and they're willing to fight a little bit harder to make it happen, and be along the journey with you. So that's really powerful what you said there. And we have just a few minutes left. I don't want to, make sure I don't want to have anybody go over and then, have conflicts with other things that are going on. But I think this is such a fascinating subject. We could definitely go into more detail on it. To sort of wrap up today, I'm going to ask everyone one question and then just say, thank you as well. But if you have to, from your point of view, I just asked this question, like, what do you think is happening right now in terms of what you're seeing with your clients that, I would say is like, what do you think that's the most effective that your client one thing that your clients are doing right now that you think, surprisingly effective in 2022 that maybe people don't realize is effective? So I will start with Boyd.
Thanks, Jay. It's a tricky one, I think, because it's going to be different for every customer. And the fact that, some people are doing cold outreach, which is, old email marketing stuff. Others are doing SEO and, they're revisiting things like that. So I think it's specific to every customer. So I think the one thing is to find out what your one thing is, to look at all of the levers you can pull and start to understand which one's going to be the most effective. So don't go looking for the shiny thing just because everybody else is doing it. Find the one thing that will work best for you.
I like that.
Thanks, guys.
I think to the question is really like, is there something that you're seeing that's working that maybe people think is like, this doesn't work anymore? And in one of your clients, like what's been effective? But I think that's really helpful that it's about, to some extent, discovering what works best for you, and it's not going to be the same for everyone else. So therefore, it's important to have a process to figure that out, right? Not just have a process to figure that out. So Bernard, what would you say to that same question? What's one thing one of your clients is doing that's very effective that maybe people don't realize, would be working?
Well, I don't want to butter Jay up, but there's definitely a huge push towards content and what search is doing with content. And the other thing that we found really is working quite effectively is also like collaborative content. So producing a roundtable or doing something very similar to this, where you're actually bringing people together. That way you're leveraging a lot of different markets. And as long as you're bringing the right people into the room, being really targeted in how you produce content and repurpose it, I think is extremely useful. And we're seeing a lot of bang for buck on Google when you produce really meaty written content as well. So I think there's a big content play right now on the search side of things. So.
Okay, and then very briefly, John, what's one thing that you're seeing that your clients, well, you and Bernard work on similar clients, but what do you see? What's the one thing that you would like to bring up that you're seeing that's really working well?
Well, I think it's, I have to mention it's outbound sales. We have a component of our business where they essentially hire us for 1 day a week. And as a result of that outbound sales process, clients have to get clear on who they want to target. So it's a natural ABM strategy. And then we have the marketing to plug it in to support sales and marketing, and it actually works really, really well. So that's what's working well for us. Sorry,
I really like that, because one of the things that you and Bernard do is marry the sales with the marketing and the integration of the two, and I think that's good that you brought that up. Outbound sales is actually kind of, again, very controversial right now because so much focus on inbound. So for you to say, outbound, essentially outreach and cold calling and setting appointments and all those kinds of things still work. That's really a great thing to bring up. Joana, what is for you for startups? As we talked about, they have so many options in front of them. Maybe you could talk about one thing that you're seeing that's actually helping those startups right now.
Absolutely. I'd have to say niching. It sounds so simple, but yeah, it's something not a lot of people do. A lot of companies, when they create their website with their messaging, they're trying to pretty much explain, because I mainly work in the SaaS and tech space, every time I go to one of these websites, all I see is, features, pricing, and it really doesn't aim to solve any particular person's pain point. And I think the reason for that is they haven't done the homework to actually find out who their niche is. So I think if they just simply did that and they sat down and they said, you know what, we want to work with these people specifically that are in this industry, that are this size company, that are, perhaps using these types of technologies, they're the ones that are going to work best for us. And then just essentially creating the messaging, whether it be through the website, through the content such as blogs, ebooks, white papers, anything that goes out through social media just needs to kind of work together consistently to target that niche. They're more likely to then have conversations with those people because those people feel like, this really spoke to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think just this will be sort of the summary of this and then we'll wrap up. But imagine if you're selling fintech or financial products services and you're saying all the things about your products, but there's somebody who wants to retire at 45 and they're actually, that's their goal. They're ready to do it and they need financial planning help. And, let's say they live in Sydney, their kids are currently in high school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, if you have a brand that really addresses them, then they can see themselves, they can see that you really understand their situation. Like, are you almost ready to retire early? We've helped, hundreds of people like you. We know some of your questions, like what's it going to look like if you have 30 years of retirement ahead of you, right? Most people don't have 30 years living in retirement. So immediately you start to see the problem differently and you can relate directly to them. They're like, this is for me. You're not just solving financial services. You can always expand after that, right? You can always expand your market after that. Is that accurate, Joana?
You can, yeah. I mean, if you look at some of the greats, Amazon, that they started with books and then they expanded after that. So absolutely, you can expand and grow after that. I think that's people's biggest concern is, if we niche, we're missing out on all these, these people. But essentially, you're actually growing quicker because you're capturing clients quicker, and then you can use, the resources after that to then figure out what other clients can we have, what other products can we create that would cater to those clients. So yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right, everybody. I just give everybody a chance to say thank you for being here. It's great to have everybody here. Amazing group of people, great questions. And we have 4 more days coming up, live panel every single day with excellent panelists, amazing talks. And I look forward to having Boyd. I just want to say thank you, Boyd, for being part of this. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, John. And thank you, Bernard.
Thanks, Jay.
Have a great day, everybody. We'll be available in all time zones around the clock. So let us know what other follow-up questions you have. And we'll see you on the next live panel coming up in approximately 24 hours. Take care, everyone. This is Jay Sen with the Content Marketing Virtual Summit. Bye.
Cool. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. So we're